Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths. I have a couple of questions of my own, time permitting. And let me start with you, Mr. Griffith, with a rather simple question about numbers, because you are the numbers guy. Yesterday at committee, we heard very powerful testimony that, in fact, if we need essential workers and we want them to come to Canada to do essential work, then they should be granted permanent residency on landing. So my question to you is, the immigration level plan next year calls for 485,000 permanent residents to be landed. If we were to do that, if we were to make that recommendation, what impact would that have in the next year on that 485,000? To what level would that be increased?
Oh, that's a hard level. You didn't give me enough time in advance to sort of crunch the numbers.
You
but
can
I
get
think
back to us.
I'll do a bit of work on that because it's an interesting question. But I think fundamentally the levels plan has to sort of factor in every different aspect of that, and the question should actually address this sort of saying, okay, when we look at the plan and we look at sort of what the provinces are doing and what the federals are doing, do we have the balance right in relation to the current and future demands of the economy?
You also raised a very, very interesting point about the capacity that provincial nominee programs have. They're closer to the ground, they have greater latitude. Do you believe that one recommendation should be that provincial nominee programs in various provinces should be enhanced with the view to essential workers? So they have the capacity, they have the knowledge, they should get the numbers.
I think it's a valid proposal. That the challenge, of course, is that the provinces are also a bit overly attracted with the higher skilled rather than the lower skilled. But I think you're seeing some signs in healthcare and like that they're starting to review that. And so I think that's one consideration that the committee should definitely look at. Thank you.
So still staying with you, Mr. Griffiths, and I'm still in my time limit, not doing myself any special favors, colleagues. I heard what you said about productivity, and I have read most of the articles in the newspapers about what economists say, that the real measure of Canada's prosperity is GDP growth per capita as opposed to GDP growth per se. I'm not an economist, but I've had it explained to me by Mikhail Sketterud that if the size of the pie remains the same and more people are eating from that pie, it means less and less for every individual, whereas what we need to do is grow the pie. And we can grow the pie by improving wages, by improving working standards, and tapping into the domestic market. So my question to you is this. Do you believe that Canadians, even with improved labor market conditions, are willing to pick raspberries, work in fish processing plants, care for senior citizens, or make beds in hotels?
Well, that's almost a rhetorical question because I think the answer is pretty obvious, is that no, the working conditions aren't attractive, and that's why we have, effectively a temporary foreign workers program to address those sectors. I think, so the challenge is, do we rely on immigration, temporary immigration or permanent immigration, to fulfill those demands? Or do we actually look at what are the ways we can do to actually improve the working conditions? In some of those sectors, I think we can do that. In some of the sectors, there's greater opportunities in terms of technology. You're seeing that in some other jurisdictions on agricultural harvesting. But yes, to answer shortly, those jobs are not attractive to Canadians. And in fact, the trades, which are skilled occupations, generally are less attractive to Canadians. And I'm sure, most of us, our kids didn't end up at the trades. They ended up as knowledge workers, so to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Faraday. A quick clarification from you. You mentioned the figure 500,000 undocumented workers in Canada a number of times. Where's the evidence of that number? And if you do have it, could you send it to us, please?
The evidence comes from an RCMP report, and it is, but it is acknowledged as being a lowball figure. given that people are undocumented, it's hard to count. Can I just say quickly, GDP isn't a measure of how well we're doing. GDP is a measure of the scale of profit, and it's not a measure of the distribution in the economy. So I think GDP can be misleading because it doesn't look at how people are actually doing, right? So when you say, will people do those jobs? Yes, they will if they're paid appropriately and the conditions are safe, but they're not, which is why people who have other options go elsewhere. And on the provincial nominee program, no, they're going to go for the shiny high skill jobs just the same way that the federal government has. In order to make this happen, the federal government has to take the lead and say we need a direct immigration route for people in these critical jobs that actually contribute to people's well-being in our economy and in our communities.
Thank you very much to both our witnesses. Our time has come to an end. We have learned a great deal from both of you, and we really do look forward to receiving any further submissions or recommendations in particular. Ms. Faraday, you said you would get us some, and I believe, Mr. Griffiths, you said that too. That would be in